The NVIDIA GeForce GTX 980 came out in 2014, and that means it is almost 11 years old. That's crazy. That's like an eternity. So much has changed in that time. So what we're going to find out in this video is, does the GTX 980 still play games in 2025? So we received this GTX 980 from our friends over at Tech Lab UK. So thank you very much for sending this over. We're really looking forward to testing this to see how it goes. This thing is a blower style card, as you can see, and it's also a 2-slot card. None of this 2 and a bit slot shenanigans that you get sometimes, or 3-slot as in some cases. Although graphics cards are getting smaller now, which is really, really good. So it only has one fan on it, which will blow the air, it will suck the air in and then blow it out through the back of the case, which in your head sounds quite good, and it means it doesn't get hot inside the case, but that's not always the case with blower style GPUs, and sometimes they just don't cool as well as say one of these, my 3070 Ti. They don't work as well as dual fan or triple fan GPUs. So moving on to the specifications of this card, because I'm pretty sure that some of my viewers probably don't even know what the GTX 980 is, being that it's quite old now. Now it runs on the Maxwell architecture, which is the GM204 chip and has 2048 cores, 128 TMUs, 64 ROPs, and only 4 gig of GDDR5. And this thing runs on a 256-bit bus, which is insane for a card that's this old. Now, our slight concern here is that it's only got 4 gig of RAM. Now, we have tested a GPU, the GTX 1050, and that only had 2 gig of RAM on it. That was quite a few years ago now, and that struggled with some games. And this one does have 4, so I'm hoping that the experience will be a little bit better, if not allow us to change some of the in-game settings, because what we found is that with cards with low RAM, some games like Red Dead Redemption 2, for example, won't let you change any settings to do with the graphics. So you couldn't do anything. It just kind of set it and that was it. But I'm hoping with 4 gig of RAM, we'll at least be able to change some settings in some of the games. Now, moving along to the games, some of the games we're just going to handpick from our own library, but 2 of the games have been picked by our viewers. Now, we posted over on X probably about a week ago now, and 2 people reached out to us and said some games that they want us to test on it. So one of those games is BeamNG, and another game chosen by one of our viewers is Hell Let Loose, which came out in 2019. We're going to throw in a couple of games of our own choosing as well. One of those games will be Assetto Corsa Evo. That one has just come out. I'm not entirely sure how that is going to run on this thing, being as it's quite old and only has 4 gig of RAM. So I'm not expecting too much for that one. And it is an early access game as well, and there are issues with that. So we're going to try it anyway, just to see what happens. And I'll maybe bung in another one depending on how much time we have left. So let's get this thing put in the machine behind me and see how it goes. Okay, so on to one of our viewer choices now. This is BeamNG, and as you can see, we are getting pretty acceptable frame rates, I would say. We are currently running at the high preset at 1440p, and as you can see, as we're changing views in quite a busy area with AI traffic and the collisions in this game, if you know anything about this game, the collisions in this game are insane. You can have some really interesting times in it. Now, let's talk about this system before we go any further. The system we've got this in is my actual editing rig, the one I use every day for doing videos and work and all the other normal things that we do. Now, I'm running a 5800X, a Ryzen 7 5800X with 48 gigs of DDR4 4000 RAM in there. And that's basically it. Nothing else in the system will make that much difference to this GTX 980. As you can see, we're only using about 30% of the CPU here, and we are fully capped out on our GPU at 99% there. I've not seen it go to 100%, it just stays at 99%. ATC this graphics card is getting. As I said earlier, blower style cards do get quite hot. So it is a little bit hot there, but it is hovering around that mark and it doesn't seem to be getting any hotter, to be honest with you. And we've had this running for maybe an hour now before we started filming this section of the video. This one is a bit of a weird game. There's not really that many goals that I've seen in it. You can basically just go around and chase cops and crash and do all sorts of weird stuff like that in it. It's actually quite a good game. It is also multiplayer as well, but as you can see, we are getting our average FPS of about 40 there. This is our average, this is our instant FPS, and then our 1% lows are a little bit low, but I think that is where we're loading in new cars and resetting the view and stuff like that. All right, so we've reset our 1% lows benchmarks there, and as you can see, it's gone up a little bit. We're gonna let that, I don't know if there's explosions in this game, but I guess we're going to find out in a minute. We can see there that our 1% lows, we don't really care about the 0.1% lows here. Our 1% lows are pretty good, 30 FPS in this game. We are at 1440p. Now anything lower than that resolution is just going to be an improvement in the game performance itself. So Will has changed into some kind of Formula One go-kart thing. I don't know what the hell this thing is, but it's really weird. Anyway, there are loads of cars and mods that you can download for this game, and it just keeps this game running. This game has been ongoing in alpha or beta or something like that. I don't think it's even been properly released yet. For literal years. I knew about this game literally years ago, and it's still in development, but it is only getting better over time. So it's good to see the different scenery being built up, and this was definitely not in the game when I first heard and played this game, and it looks quite good. It's kind of like a GTA but with better physics. Oh yeah, there we go. Roll it, roll it, roll it. Oh. Okay, so now we're in the police car. We're going to change the resolution. We're going to drop it down to 1080p and see what kind of performance we get with that. All right, so we've reduced the resolution down to 1080p. As you can see, the MSI Afterburner stats are now huge on the screen because we've changed the resolution of the game. It's definitely running a lot smoother, and it definitely looks a lot smoother. I don't know how that translates to the video, but we're getting our 60 FPS, our instant FPS, our average is nearly 60, not quite, we're getting there, but it is going up. And our 1% lows are now a bit higher, 47 FPS on that. And the brakes still are not very good in this police car. So we're going to try and increase the level of detail up to the ultra setting and just see if we can make it look a bit better. Okay, so we've increased the graphics preset to ultra now. And as you can see, we've taken a massive hit in our average FPS. It's now down to 27 FPS on our average, and our instant FPS isn't much better either. Our 1% lows, really, really low now. We've lost about 20 FPS on that. But the game does look all right. It's not too bad, as best as it can look at 1080p. Probably not the resolution that I would want to play it at, to be honest with you, on a big screen like this. On a maybe smaller screen, probably be fine. All right, so we've changed it back to the high preset now, and we're not getting the FPS that we were a moment ago, but I think it's still playable for a game like this. It's absolutely fine. So I would recommend 1440p at maybe normal or high settings for that extra fidelity, but if you need a bit more FPS, then obviously drop that down to 1080p. But I think for a 14-year-old, oh, hello. I think for a 14-year-old card with only 4 gig of RAM on it, GDDR5 RAM as well, I think it's doing really well in this game. Really, really impressed. That was an excellent choice from one of our viewers. Moving on to our next viewer choice game. This is Hell Let Loose, and we're in the graphics settings menu. We want to get that out of the way now before we start getting into the game. We've got it set to 1440p at epic preset settings. Now you can see them on the screen, hopefully you can see that now. And we've got motion blur on. We are actually going to turn that off. So if you can turn that off for me, that would be awesome. Nope, yep, thank you. And it still says epic at the top there, whereas some games show custom as soon as you change a setting, but this one shows epic, I guess, until we save it. So if you can apply those settings, and we'll get going and see what this one's like. Okay, here we are. We've actually managed to get into a game in Hell Let Loose. The queues in Hell Let Loose are just insane. Almost page after page after page, almost 100 people in every server. And they have a queuing system, which you have to queue for, obviously, unless you're a VIP member. But we've actually gone into the game now. Same settings we were on a moment ago. There are pretty much 100 people in this game right now, and we're dead already. So let's go back into the game. If we can go back into the game. All right, so we're back in the game again after dying again. This game is just insane for that. But as we can see, it's very reminiscent of the style of gameplay that Arma used to give you, where it's kind of maybe a little bit more realistic than things like, say, Battlefield 5 and stuff like that. And died again. I don't know if we're going to get a proper reading on our FPS at the minute because we keep dying and it just looks up at the sky. As you can see there, it's 99 FPS looking up at the sky. Okay, so hopefully we can stay in the game without dying too quick. We're kind of in... Oh my God, come on. Okay, so we've got into a different level now. It's moved on to the next map and we're in the warm-up area. As you can see, it clearly says it on the screen. We noticed a very big dip in the FPS on this particular map compared to the previous one where we kept dying. Not great. Our DirectX 11 FPS is 25 FPS, is our average FPS. It is not a great experience. Don't forget, we are still at 1440p, so we could actually just go in and drop this down to 1080p and see what kind of experience we can get with that. So let's do that. So we've dropped the FPS to 1080p. We kept the settings as they were. We haven't changed those at all. And our FPS has gone up a little bit. Not much. It's definitely showing a little bit smoother than it was before. Obviously, everything looks a little bit less clear, maybe a little bit fuzzy, if you will. But that's normal with dropping your resolution down to 1080p. But it does seem that we are getting a more consistent 30 FPS there. Our average is still going up. I don't think it's going to go up much more because our instant FPS is kind of around low 20s, low 30s there as well. And our 1% lows at this point in the game, because we are actually in the game now by the look of it, is quite low as well, 23. Probably still not where you want to be for this particular game. So I think that what we will do is drop the graphical settings down to the next preset down. Okay, so we did change it down to the high preset, but unfortunately it made little to no difference in the FPS. So we've dropped it down to the normal in-game preset. And as you can see now, the FPS has jumped up quite dramatically, and to be honest with you, it does look a little bit fuzzy compared to what it was. Don't forget, we're still at 1080p, but our average FPS has gone up to 73 FPS now, and our instant FPS is still quite high, so our average is still going up because our instant FPS is still quite high, as I just said, nearly 80, 85 I think I saw there a moment ago. Our 1% lows are now 57, which is nearly on that 60 FPS target that we like to get with our 1% lows in all the games that we test on the channel. And we don't really care about the 0.1% lows. I just have it on the screen so people can see it if they want to. But it's a much smoother experience now and definitely playable. Maybe not so much on a huge big screen like this, as I said in the previous game. Definitely probably would want to play it on a smaller screen at this resolution. But 99% on our GPU, as we would expect with the graphics card and the CPU combination we've got in there. CPU is a little bit higher there, 36%, but it's no problem. You know, it's a 5800X, no problem, and it's coping really well. Our memory is maxed out, as it has been on pretty much all the games, as you will have seen watching this video. It only has 4 gig of RAM in it, so it's really pushing the limits of the graphics card that we have in here. Okay, so we're only using about 60 to 75% of our GPU's power availability. So bearing in mind that this is an MSI graphics card, we can actually use MSI Afterburner or any graphics card tool to overclock it. But what we're pulling is 130 watts as it is right now with no overclocking, just the default latest NVIDIA drivers on this graphics card. So really good experience, although not graphically that amazing. Okay, so one last thing we've done with this game, we've put it back up to 1440p with the normal preset of this game. And I must say, everything is looking a lot sharper and a lot clearer than it was in 1080p, as you would expect by upping the resolution. Our FPS has dropped a little bit, but still around the 60 FPS mark on our instant FPS there. Our average is still 73 as it was a moment ago because we've just reset the resolution. If we can just reset the 1% lows there, we'll see that change as well. There we go, we can see it all kicking into action now we've reset that. But still very, very playable frame rates on this particular map. Bearing in mind that when we first loaded into this map, it was not that great on the Epic settings. So for this graphics card, Epic is out of the question in this game. Normal is more than good enough. It looks an absolutely awesome game, to be honest with you, and I think I might actually start playing this one. Anyway, that is Hell Let Loose, and now on to our choice of games. All right then, so moving on to Assetto Corsa Evo, a title that I don't expect to run very well on this graphics card, and as you can probably see in the top right corner, roughly, we are not getting a very good frame rate. It's about 15 or 6 average FPS, 14 on our instance, so the FPS on the average will actually start increasing over time, depending on how it goes. We are running at 1080p on the lowest preset that is available in this game. Bearing in mind that it's an early access game, there aren't that many settings that you can set in it really at this moment in time. It probably won't be released for another year or so yet, but this is the performance we're getting. But to see how it actually performs, I don't have anyone to race. So I'm going to head over to the steering wheel and I'm going to leave you to watch. So here we are in Assetto Corsa Evo, and I'm going to be honest with you, this is really not playable as it is at the moment. Racing like this would not be a great experience. Well, let's just give it a bit of time. You know, maybe it will improve. I'm not going to lie, it's almost like a PowerPoint presentation, to be honest. This is just bonkers. Don't ever play it like this. This is just crazy. Now, what we're going to try and do is enable upscaling, because this game does support upscaling, FSR and DLSS. Okay, so now we've enabled FSR 3 in the performance setting, and as you can see, we're getting a much better frame rate than we were. Nearly, well, 24 on our instant FPS, but our average is still increasing. Obviously, that takes a little bit of time to go back up after being so low as we were previously, but not an amazing frame rate, but maybe possibly just about playable. And we are at the lowest graphics preset in this game as well. Bearing in mind, this is an early access game, as everyone always says. It's not going to be the full game, could be completely different in a month or in a day. But this is what it is now. But this is with no other cars on the track. With other cars on the track, I can't imagine this thing is going to perform that well at all, to be honest with you. But we will give that a go and just see what frame rate we get with the other cars on the track. So let's go over and give that a go. All right, so here we are driving around Brands Hatch. I've gone back to this and letting someone else do the driving because it's quite difficult because the steering wheel is literally facing in the opposite direction, so it makes it a bit interesting. As you can see, this is the track, or this is Evo with 10 cars. You can't see the cars because they're bombing on around the track at this minute. And the performance, even with the FSR3 set at the lowest FSR3 setting, performance is just not coping with this game. But to be honest, I didn't really expect it to. But for a single player, just hot lapping type thing when you're just driving around yourself, it's possible at 1080p that you could potentially play this game at 1080p at the lowest settings with FSR3 enabled. Obviously this card, the GTX 980, does not support DLSS upscaling. So FSR3 is our only option for that performance boost that we are getting. But even now, you wouldn't really be able to complete a race with other cars on the track. Maybe if we reduce that down to 5 or something, it might be a little bit better. But with only 10 cars on the track, you wouldn't seriously want to race like this. It's really, really crap. As I said, it's an early access game, and we're getting an instant FPS of 8 FPS. Our average is higher than our instant, which is a bit weird, so I'll imagine that will go down over time. But not a great experience for Evo with this 980 with 4 gig of RAM, you might want to look elsewhere for your racing excitement. Okay, I just want to point out that I just said this was 10 cars. It's actually 21 cars, so no wonder it's suffering with the FPS. So we're going to quickly go back and change this to 10 cars and just see what the performance is like with less cars on the track. Okay, so we have reloaded the race now with 10 cars. As you can see on there, hopefully you can see that, there are now 10, well it says 11 actually, but 10 opponents. So technically there is 11, that is correct. So if we can just start the game, start the race, and here we go. No idea what difference this is going to make reducing the amount of cars. You're already moving. Ooh. Now the AI in this game is aggressive as you saw. You just can't race like this when they're all near you. Now they've gone around the track a little bit. It's a little bit better, but we're kind of back where we were earlier in this game, where the FPS is not that great. So actually reducing the cars to 10, or technically half of what we were on a moment ago, has made literally no difference to the performance on this graphics card in this game. So if you really, really want to play this game, particularly on the GTX 980, I probably would not. I would just not. It's just not going to be a good experience, and you'll end up hating the game, and it's not the game's fault. It's the graphics card's fault. So we've got, you know, as we said earlier, we've got a 5800X in there, which is sat there pretty much not doing a lot. Now the GPU's not doing anything. In fact, I think the game has crashed. No, it's carrying on. It is carrying on. So as you can see, the GPU is just maxed out. It just can't push anymore. It's just got no more oomph in it for this particular game. But it is an early access game, as we've already mentioned. Well, there you go. That is our look at the GTX 980. Now, it's been long overdue. We've had this card a little while, and we do have some other plans for this. So get subscribed and like this video so you see when future videos drop with the GTX 980 and some of the things we've got in store for this particular GPU. But if you've got ideas of games that you want to see tested on any GPU, not just the GTX 980, then do comment in the comment section in this video and on our posts on X. So just go and look for WND Tech on X and make sure that you're aware of the posts and reply to that when we ask you what games that we want to play with a certain graphics card, for instance. But that is it. I hope you like this video, and we'll see you in the next one.